What if the secret to, staying at the absolute peak of your profession, well into your 90s, isn't about just working harder?
Right, which is what we're always told to do.
Exactly. But what if instead it requires, like, ruthlessly abandoning your own ideas or aggressively ignoring most of your weaknesses and spending your precious free time studying medieval history?
I mean, honestly, that sounds like a recipe for getting fired in today's corporate environment.
It really does.
But it is actually the precise blueprint of, well, one of the most prolific minds of the 20th century.
Yeah, because we usually think about human aging, especially professional aging, with this underlying assumption of inevitable decline,
Hmm.
like a car engine. You put enough miles on it, and eventually the parts just start to wear down, the thinking gets rigid, the ideas get a little stale, and you're just simply not as sharp as you used to be.
Yeah, that's the standard narrative.
Right. But then you look at someone like the legendary management thinker Peter Drucker. I mean, this is a guy who didn't just coast on his accumulated experience.
Mm.
He stayed profoundly relevant, incredibly sharp, and insanely productive for over 70 years.
And he didn't achieve that longevity through some, stroke of biological luck. He did it by treating his mind not as a static machine, but as an ecosystem.
Oh, an ecosystem.
Yeah, that framing is crucial because ecosystems require active, intentional management.
Right.
They require pruning. They need entirely new seeds planted, and they demand objective observation to see what's actually thriving and what is just, choking out the sunlight.
Which brings us to the mission for this deep dive. We are working from a truly fascinating stack of articles, historical research, and notes detailing Drucker's unique framework.
A huge stack.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot. And it's a system often referred to as managing oneself.
Right.
So our goal today is to extract his portable discipline for lifelong intellectual sharpness. Because whether you are, say, prepping for a major strategic meeting or trying to pivot in your career, or you are just insanely curious about how to avoid losing your edge, this deep dive is going to fundamentally challenge how you manage your most valuable asset.
Which is your own mind.
Exactly.
It really is a survival guide for the modern era. I mean,
Huh.
we are constantly trapped between information overload on one side and total intellectual stagnation on the other.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before you can absorb new information or reinvent yourself, Drucker believed you have to know exactly what you are working with, right?
Right. He argued that modern knowledge workers basically have to act as their own CEOs.
And being your own CEO starts with 5 fundamental questions for radical self-knowledge.
And they are tough questions.
Yeah, they are. So what are my strengths? How do I perform? What are my values? Where do I belong? And finally, what can I contribute?
Those questions sound deceptively simple, but, I mean, they are incredibly difficult to answer honestly.
Oh, for sure.
Let's look at that second one, for instance. How do I perform? Specifically, am I a reader or a listener?
That's a big one.
It is. Drucker's noticed that people constantly fight their own nature. If you are naturally a listener, reading a 50-page brief before a meeting is going to be incredibly inefficient for you.
You'll just zone out.
Right, you will retain a fraction of it. And conversely, if you are a reader, sitting through a 2-hour verbal debrief will literally drive you crazy. You need the document in front of you to process the information.
Yeah, and we force ourselves into the wrong modes all the time. I mean, a real CEO wouldn't force a brilliant marketing director to sit in a cubicle and do tax accounting.
Exactly.
But we do that to ourselves. We just completely ignore our natural performance modes. And that ties directly into the fourth question, where do I belong?
Yeah, and that is a massive stumbling block for many professionals.
How so?
Well, asking where you belong means looking at the structure of your environment. Do you thrive in a highly structured, hierarchical Fortune 500 company where all the rules are super clear? Or, do you produce your best work in the chaotic, unstructured environment of an early stage startup?
Oh, that makes sense.
Right, because if you thrive in chaos, taking a promotion into a rigid corporate bureaucracy isn't a success. It's a trap.
Wow, yeah. But to actually answer these questions, Drucker didn't just sit around meditating on a mountaintop. He used a highly specific tool called feedback analysis.
Yes, this is key.
So whenever he made a key decision or a major prediction, he would write down exactly what he expected the results to be.
Just physically write it out.
Yeah. Then he would literally put that piece of paper away in a drawer. 6 to 12 months later, he would pull it out and compare the actual outcomes in reality to his initial expectations.
What's fascinating here is how clinical this process is. It is an objective audit of your own judgment.
It makes me think of a corporate balance sheet.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. But instead of auditing your finances to see where the money went, you are auditing your internal logic to see where your assumptions broke down.
Let's imagine a concrete example of how this actually plays out. Say you are a leader who prides yourself on your strategic pivots, but you also believe you have a great gut instinct for hiring.
Okay, pretty common.
Right. So you make a major pivot, you hire a new team to execute it, and you write down your expected outcome. A year later, you pull out the log. The strategic pivot was brilliant and highly profitable, but the team you hired completely fell apart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the feedback log shatters your assumption. It proves your strength is high-level strategy, but your weakness is actually evaluating personnel.
But I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Isn't tracking every major decision, writing it down, and then waiting a full year to review it just, well, isn't it exhausting?
It sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't that slow down a fast-paced learner?
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a world where we want feedback loops in milliseconds, not months.
Mm.
You know, we want the data dashboard to update in real time.
I hear that, but the delay is the entire point.
Really?
Yeah. Millisecond feedback tells you if a tweet went viral or if a piece of code compiled correctly. It does not tell you if your long-term strategic thinking is sound.
Ah.
We constantly confuse velocity with trajectory. By waiting 6 to 12 months, Drucker forced himself to look at long-term reality, not just short-term noise. And here's the crucial distinction. He didn't use this exhaustive process to try and fix all of his weaknesses.
But he wasn't trying to become the ultimate well-rounded executive.
Not at all. He used the feedback analysis to identify and eradicate only the specific flaws and bad habits that were actively impeding his core strengths.
Oh, so just the roadblocks.
Exactly. If the audit showed he was bad at something that simply didn't matter to his primary goals, he just ignored it entirely.
That's incredibly liberating.
It is. He focused all of his energy on what he did uncommonly well, rather than wasting years trying to elevate a natural weakness to a state of mere mediocrity.
Which creates a fascinating crisis of capacity, right? Because once the feedback loop shows you your true strengths, you suddenly realize just how much time and energy you're wasting on things outside of those strengths.
Oh, absolutely.
But your plate is already full. You can't just add more focus on your strengths. You have to subtract the noise.
Yes.
And this leads us directly into Drucker's ruthless method for creating mental white space. It brings up one of the most powerful concepts from the source material, planned abandonment.
Yes, systematic abandonment is the ultimate art of subtraction, because we are naturally hoarders of tasks and responsibilities.
Totally. And he applied this concept to entire businesses, but he also applied it to his own daily life. It's the process of shedding obsolete routines and what he called yesterday's logic.
Yesterday's logic, yeah.
And the guiding question he used for this is just brilliant. He would look at a project or a commitment and ask, if we weren't already doing this, would we start it now?
That single question cuts right through the sunk cost fallacy.
It really does.
We hold on to projects, daily routines, or even entire lines of philosophical thinking simply because we've already invested time in them. By asking, would we start this today, knowing what we know now, you give yourself the psychological permission to drop the dead weight.
Which is so hard to do.
It is, but in times of rapid change, continuing to rely on outdated processes just because they are familiar is the single greatest danger to your intellectual edge.
Right. But to figure out what to abandon, you first have to know where your time is actually going.
Mm-hmm.
And Drucker was massive on time logging. He didn't believe in estimating your time because human beings invariably lie to themselves about how they spend their days.
We are terrible at estimating time.
So bad at it. So he advocated for literally tracking it in real time. Because when you track it, you can start batching your hours to create what he called think time.
And we should clarify that think time in the Drucker universe was not just a quick 15 minutes between answering emails.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
He carved out these massive 90-minute blocks of deep work, usually in the early mornings. The sources describe his posture during this time as belligerently reclusive.
I love that phrase.
Is it great? He would just sit there typing on an old typewriter, no distractions, no visitors, and he possessed a visceral hatred of meetings.
Oh, he really did.
He viewed meetings as a fundamental failure of organization. His famous rule was that if an organization spends more than 25% of its time in meetings, it suffers from fatty degeneration.
It is such a vivid, almost medical diagnosis of corporate dysfunction.
It perfectly captures the danger. It's
Uh-huh.
exactly like cholesterol in the human body.
Yeah.
All those aimless check-ins, the daily stand-ups, the status updates, they just build up and clog the arteries of actual deep thought until the whole intellectual system has a heart attack.
That's exactly what happens.
But here is the massive question for a modern professional. It is incredibly easy to be belligerently reclusive with an old typewriter in a home office in 1975.
Mm.
But how can someone listening to this right now, someone who is absolutely buried in Slack messages, Teams notifications, and back-to-back Zoom calls, possibly achieve Drucker's level of deep work without losing their political capital or just getting flat out fired?
Yeah, it's the most common tension knowledge workers face today. What if your boss actively expects you to be green on Slack all day? You can't just go dark and quote Peter Drucker as your defense.
Right. Sorry, boss. Drucker told me to.
Exactly. That won't end well.
Yeah.
But the why behind Drucker's behavior still translates, even if the how requires more negotiation. Drucker lived simply and avoided the consulting empire trap, specifically to protect his unstructured time.
What do you mean by that?
Well, he didn't want a massive staff because management requires meetings. For the modern worker, this means you have to actively manage up.
So it's less about the tool, the typewriter, and entirely about building a negotiated fortress around your attention.
Precisely. You have to communicate boundaries. It might mean going to your manager and saying, look, to deliver the deep strategic work you need from me on this project, I need to block out 90 minutes every morning where I am unreachable except for emergencies.
Which is totally reasonable.
It is. It means aggressively declining meetings that lack a clear agenda. You have to design your environment to protect your unstructured time, because that white space is the absolute prerequisite for reflection and learning. If you don't fight for it, the ecosystem of your mind simply gets overrun by weeds.
Okay, so let's assume you've done the hard work. You've audited your judgment, you've systematically abandoned yesterday's logic, and you've successfully negotiated to fiercely protect your time.
You've built the fortress.
Right. You finally have all this mental white space. What do you fill it with? Because the answer here is not what most career counselors would expect.
No, it really isn't.
It isn't deeper, narrower specialization in your chosen field. It is radical curiosity.
Which runs completely counter to the modern career advice of, find your highly specific niche and never ever leave it.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting. Drucker operated by this incredible principle known as the 3-year reinvention rule.
This is one of my favorite concepts.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Every 3 years, he would pick a completely new, totally unrelated subject to study intensively. And we are not talking about a management consultant studying a slightly different flavor of macroeconomics.
No, not at all.
We're talking about deep dives into Japanese art, medieval history, advanced statistics.
He was systematically building range. Drucker vehemently resisted the trap of narrow specialization.
Yeah.
He believed that deep expertise in one single area often blinds people to broader societal patterns. I mean, when you only look through the lens of supply chain logistics, every single problem in the world looks like a supply chain issue.
That makes total sense. I have to be honest, though. The idea of picking up a comprehensive study of Japanese art while I'm already working 50 hours a week sounds less like a growth engine and more like a fast track to severe burnout.
Oh, I can see why you'd say that.
Right. How did he actually execute this without it becoming a grueling second job?
Well, it comes down to the type of energy it requires. Doing more of your regular job leads to burnout because you are depleting the same cognitive muscles over and over again.
Okay.
Studying an entirely unrelated field is a form of play. It feels restorative. It builds entirely new neural pathways. Rest isn't always about doing nothing sometimes. It is about doing something completely different.
And he didn't even consider himself a management guru. The guy who essentially invented modern management called himself a social ecologist and a historian.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, studying those completely unrelated domains was actually the secret engine of his predictive power.
How so?
Think about his study of medieval history. On the surface, what does the Middle Ages have to do with corporate America?
Absolutely nothing.
Right, but medieval history is essentially the study of how society transitioned from feudal agriculture to specialized trade guilds. By understanding how power and value shifted during that era, Drucker had the exact historical lens he needed to recognize a similar shift happening in the 20th century.
Oh, wow. That is how he predicted the rise of the knowledge worker, decades before it became a common term.
Exactly. The narrow specialists were looking at micro trends in factory assembly line efficiency. Drucker was looking at the broad sweep of civilization.
Inexorable.
Because of his diverse mental database, he recognized that the fundamental nature of value creation was shifting from physical labor to intellectual capital. He saw the pattern early because he wasn't standing too close to the canvas.
And he didn't just read about this stuff passively either. The source material highlights his specific tools for mental clarity.
Yes, he was very active in his learning.
He used writing not just as a way to record his finished thoughts, but as the actual mechanism to clarify his thinking. Producing books forced him to refine his abstract ideas until they were coherent. And he used teaching in the exact same way.
Teaching is the ultimate stress test of understanding, and he taught for over 60 years, well into his 90s.
He famously believed that no one learns as much as the person who has to teach the subject.
It's so true.
When you have to stand in front of a room of sharp executives or bright students and explain a complex concept out loud, it naturally exposes the hidden gaps in your own intellectual armor. You can't fake it. It keeps your thinking honest.
There is a massive risk here that we need to address, though.
What's that?
It is very easy for all of this broad reading, writing, and studying Japanese art to turn into a kind of ivory tower daydreaming, you know? You can easily become a brilliant philosopher who is completely useless in practical application.
Right. So what does this all mean for the messy reality of the real world? How did Drucker ensure that his expansive, beautifully maintained mental ecosystem actually mattered when the rubber hit the road?
He deliberately forced himself into direct contact with practice. He refused to just theorize. He consulted constantly with real organizations, businesses, governments, charities. He threw his pristine theories up against what the sources describe as messy reality.
And his approach to that messy reality was so unique. He didn't walk into a boardroom with a thick binder full of fashionable answers or the latest management fads.
No, not his style.
Instead, he utilized the immense power of inquiry. He approached complex corporate problems with deliberate ignorance.
Yes.
He would ask these incredibly simple, almost childlike, but profound questions. What is our business? Who is the customer?
It's essentially the Socratic method applied to the corporate world.
Right.
When you sit a group of executives down and ask, what is our business, you are forcing them to strip away all of their assumed jargon. You're forcing them to articulate their actual value to society, not just their theoretical value on a spreadsheet. Good questions always outlast fashionable answers.
And to keep that perspective fresh, he advocated for living in more than one world. He maintained parallel careers simultaneously. He was a writer, a teacher, a consultant, and in his later years, he shifted a huge amount of his energy toward working with nonprofits like the Girl Scouts and the Red Cross. He never let his self-worth get entirely swallowed up by one single identity or one single industry.
This raises an important question about the longevity of his motivation. Why keep pushing? Why keep writing and consulting into your 90s?
That's a long time to keep working.
It is. But Drucker didn't view management merely as a mechanical tool for extracting maximum profit. He framed management as a liberal art.
A liberal art, wow.
Yeah, he believed it was fundamentally about people, about human dignity, and about the social responsibility of institutions. By anchoring his work in those deeply human moral questions, his daily efforts retained a profound sense of purpose. It wasn't just about efficiency, it was about making society function better for actual human beings. That moral edge is what kept his motivation so incredibly high and his work so grounded.
It transforms the daily grind. I mean, it wasn't just a job. It was a calling to improve the human condition through better organization.
It highlights the difference between working to achieve a status and working to fulfill a responsibility. The latter provides a much longer runway for your career. You don't age out of wanting to improve the human condition.
So true. So as we bring all of this together for you listening, Drucker's 90-year edge wasn't a biological accident.
No.
It was a deliberate, portable discipline that you could start applying to your own life today. It is a formula.
Right.
First, you audit your judgment with the feedback loop. Write down what you expect, check it a year later, and fix only what blocks your strengths.
Perfect.
Second, you practice planned abandonment. Regularly ask yourself what obsolete processes in yesterday's logic you need to drop.
Get rid of the dead weight.
Exactly. Third, you diversify your worlds using the 3-year rule build range by studying things entirely outside your field. And finally, you ruthlessly negotiate and protect your time to do the deep work.
It is a system of continuous internal renovation. You are never finished building the ecosystem.
Drucker actually had a famous challenge that he would give his consulting clients after a long engagement, and we want to leave you with it today.
It's a great question.
After all the brilliant strategy sessions and all the deep thinking, he would look at the leadership team and ask, what are you going to do on Monday that's different?
Yeah.
Because if the answer is nothing, then you haven't actually learned anything. You've just been entertained.
Knowledge has to translate into action, or it simply vanishes.
Absolutely. And we want to take that a step further, building on that powerful concept of planned abandonment. Usually when we think about abandoning things, we think about dropping an old project at work, quitting a bad habit, or canceling a recurring meeting that wastes our time.
The physical stuff.
Right. But what if you applied planned abandonment to your very identity?
That is a fascinating proposition. Dropping the internal narrative.
Think about it. What outdated belief about who you are or how you learn is currently acting as your personal yesterday's logic?
Wow.
Are you telling yourself you aren't a math person because of a bad class you took 20 years ago? Are you clinging to the idea that you are only valuable to your company because of one highly specialized skill you learned a decade ago?
That happens all the time.
It does. And if you ruthlessly abandon that old identity today, what entirely new intellectual world would you finally have the white space to explore?
You're clearing the dead brush so the ecosystem can actually thrive.
Exactly. Because if you want your mind to stay sharp for the next 70 years, you can't treat it like a machine that just needs an occasional oil change. You have to treat it like a living garden. You have to pull the weeds, you have to plant strange new seeds, and most importantly, you have to be willing to tear up the soil and start fresh. That's how you maintain the edge.